I am Tom Stark. I am the chair of the board of the Santa Fe Recovery Center. And I sent Dennis information about the center and what we do and size and a little bit of our history. And I'm retired from Los Alamos. I have a PhD in physics, and I spent most of my career doing science and managing relatively large programs. Karen, you want to go next?
Yeah, I sort of introduced myself mostly to Dennis already, but Dennis, I'm the vice chair of the um, center, and as I said to you a few minutes ago, I'm just about at my 1 year anniversary of being on the board, um, and 1 year and 2 weeks from being vice chair. And we talked about my briefly that I had been connected to NCBH in years past and worked for the state before that in behavioral health.
It's my
Thank you very
pleasure to
much.
meet you and welcome to being the vice chair. So either
And Jeff?
congratulations or condolences. We'll figure this out, right?
There you go.
Hey, Jeff.
So my name's Jeff Pontius. I'm treasurer. 3 years retired in Santa Fe now, and been involved with the Recovery Center for 2 of those. My background's really consumer products marketing and Fortune 500 companies, um, as well as a stint working for a private family owner. So I've worked with a lot of boards. I'm on 3 different boards currently and chairman of one. So, yeah, I think I've got a little bit of background in governance issues. But I find that, our situation's a little different because it's not a large established organization. It's a small one that's growing. So that's where I think we could use some help.
Well, Jeff, it's my pleasure to meet you. I'll introduce myself briefly. I want to talk about what you need. There's a lot of information about myself and my firm on our website, DCM Associates, but I'll just sort of do this briefly. I started my firm into our 17 years, so 16 years ago, after a 25-year career. I was a medical center CEO at the age of 38. I was on numerous nonprofit boards. I was a corporate executive after that for 7 years at a publicly owned company, and I ran their right in New York and then Atlantic healthcare consulting practice. After 7 years, I got the itch to go back to the medical center world, became president CEO of another large medical teaching hospital facility and foundation. Had a great career and run. I enjoyed it tremendously. And I was very fortunate at the age of 54 to be able to do something different. And I wasn't sure what that was, but a few people said to me, you should have your own business. I said, that's great, but what kind of business? And I remember a woman that ran the American Cancer Society met with me one day, and she says, well, how did you build your board, and how did you raise all that money, and how did you do this, and how did you do this? I swear to God, a true story. So after 90 minutes, we just finished up, and I went out in the parking lot, and this light bulb, like a thunderbolt, went off, and I said, that's what I'm going to do. And so I started back then small, and I've been an advisor to nonprofits, and it's what all we do. So our firm does two major things. I'm going to put aside, we do a lot of executive search in the nonprofit space around the country, but we have a Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Performance. So I have, it's not dozens and dozens, but it's maybe 100 of nonprofit boards that I have advised and with leadership and coaching. I always tell people, if Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew I wrote 5 books about boards and leadership, she'd have a triple heart attack. I'm a speaker around most national conferences on boards and leadership. I've written about it and do that kind of work. So we have all types of assessment tools and blah, blah, blah. So that's a little bit of my background here. In terms of what you're asking for, I've experienced that maybe 1,000 times, but I know what you're looking for. And as you're going to be talking to, a lot of people, a number of different firms here, and I know you know this, that before someone can do an assessment, they need to know what best practices are. They need to know what a high-performing board looks like. What are the functions of a high-performing board? Not only its role, but are they enjoying the experience? Is it fulfilling, and a whole range of stuff. It's not just are you following your bylaws, but how effective you are as a board, and the relationship with the CEO and how effective she is, in this case she is, of an understanding her role and the role that the board should play with each other. There's a lot of things that we know based upon national research and our practice of what is best practices. So when we do an assessment, we do a couple things. First thing that we do is we want some information from you. It's just simple. So bylaws, we want board minutes of your last 6 meetings. That's a lot of things I can pick up from just reading board minutes, believe it or not. For most people think, what the hell do you want board minutes for? Trust me, there's a lot of things I can pick up. One is that if I see someone always absent, then I wonder how come they're on the board if they're never at a meeting. So little things like that, or theme or topic that's constantly being discussed, not resolved, whatever. So we're going to want to look at, information. I call it my history and physical, my blood work, my X-ray. My wife's in the medical business, you can tell. And so I want to get information, strategic plan, bylaws, financial statements, just get a snapshot of who you are. Number 2 is that I will personally want to interview everybody on your board, and I would want to interview your CEO in person on Zoom for at least an hour. Open-ended questions, not trickery, but sort of open-ended questions about what your perception is of your role, but how things are going or not going. And I cover everything possible, including from what you think your role is, how the role is going in relation with the CEO, to how you recruit board members, how your meetings are effectively done, the role of the board in philanthropy, strategic planning, and governance, and the committee structures, and all that stuff here. So that's sort of one aspect of it. The second aspect is that after the review and then the interviews, I would be highly recommending we have an executive leadership board governance online assessment tool. So I would have your executive team or senior leadership team, it's called, in your board, complete this assessment tool, which I will share with you. I could even put up on the screen soon, how anonymously, it doesn't indicate the name of anybody, but it does indicate whether it's coming from a board or leadership team member, but both from mission, vision, values, and culture to strategic goals, to executive leadership, to board governance, to strategic planning, program impact, philanthropy, branding, etc. Just get a sense of that here. Having then reviewed your information, having seen the results of the assessment, but having really more importantly talked to each of you, I then come back with a comprehensive written report of our findings of strength and our areas of recommendation in every aspect of that. That's simplifying it all, but it's very comprehensive, and I then present the report most times to either the board chair and his or her committee. But at some point in time, you want it to be as a draft, and then you get any comments you want and answer any questions. And I also then will address it with the entire board and or CEO. And I'm certainly then spend time helping you over the first few months of implementing any changes and suggestions I'm making on how you should be as a high performing board. The ultimate goal is obviously the beneficiary of those people you serve that are needing support in recovery and addiction. And so the more the board and leadership team are on the same page, the more effective you will be. I get a sense that, like any organization, there are some issues that are really good, and some issues that probably need some work. I do remember, I have a million anecdotal stories, but I do remember about 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, doing some work with a client in Philadelphia that reached out to me. And I remember I was about to start on Monday interviewing board members, and the CEO called me. She said to me, "Dan, it's just, this is going to be the worst board you ever worked for." And I said, "Debbie, don't worry about it. I've worked for hundreds of boards, not a problem." I remember calling her on Thursday and saying, "Debbie, this is the worst board I've ever worked for." Their board chair was getting paid. It was a mess. They had another board member was getting paid as liaison. It was a whole scene here. So I've seen every aspect of it, but I think what I'm good at is I've been the board chair, I've been the CEO, and I've been doing this for 40 years. I know I look like young and bright as a teenager, Karen, but I can assure you that Though I feel like I'm 39, my body is 1950 Ford truck with many parts replaced. And so that's a little bit of an overview. But the key is that, just so you know, is that, and it's my assessment. I have other people on our team, but I will do this here. We do. Example though, people on my team is Alan Weisberg, the former chief learning officer for Johnson & Johnson, some small company on the East Coast here. And Alan headed up HR for Ethicon. I've got the former president of Catholic Charities on my team. I've got a gentleman on my team that went to some small school in Indiana. I think it's called Notre Dame. He tells me they have a football team. I'm not sure if that's true. I've got a former corporate executive who was the board chair for Habitat Humanity. So our team is pretty competent, and I'd say on average, don't want to admit it to a lot of people, most of us have 30, 40 years of experience, and maybe one or two a little bit younger than that. We're just bringing on another person who is a former commissioner of Children and Families Service up in New England, another person from Los Angeles who's the president of a behavioral healthcare company. All of the work that I have done in my firm over the past 17 years is in the behavioral healthcare world, intellectual development disability world, and in the Children and Family Services world. We do a lot of work in trade associations as well. I'm a strategic partner with the National Council for what was once called Behavioral Healthcare, now Mental Wellbeing, who and their president referred me, I'm pretty sure it was to Tom. So I have experience worldwide. I've done work, Make-A-Wish, Student You Come for the Cure. I've done work for large organizations. I've done work for organizations with $1.5 million of budget. It doesn't matter to me. But that's a little bit of that. And so I want to take some time before I go into more details of questions you have of me. And I thought that might be helpful. So me to shut up for a while, which is not easy, but I would stop and want to answer some of your questions if I can.
You want to kick this off, or you want us to just jump in, or?
Yeah, anybody. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and jump in.
I'm curious when you talk about, staying with us a couple of months, after you make your recommendations to kind of get us going, how do you sort of make the assessment that we're ready to ride the bike without training wheels anymore? How do you do that transition?
Jeff, it's great because one of my expressions is you got to learn how to ride a bike while you're building it. And so I tell people this way, I'm around for as long as you need me, but I'm not a car lease. And so I like to start off with a small engagement of usually I say 3 months or 6. Oftentimes that what I'm recommending might be different for people. So I will be available for what your needs are in terms of assisting, whether it's the board or the board chair understanding why I'm asking for a suggestion or change, and particularly your CEO here. So it's not like I give a report and then walk away. It is, I'm here for as long as you need me or as less as you need me. I with every client I have, whether it's a 3-month engagement, 6 months or a year or whatever it is here, I always follow up and I'm always available for support on it without any additional charge here. My goal is to help you. I enjoy what I do here. It's not giving you a report and walking away. It's not. So it's and many times it's a little bit of hand holding. And what I say is this here, with few exceptions, I mean, like yourself, Jeff and Karen and Tom, there's 1 million nonprofits in the United States alone. So there's about, 20 million people that serve on nonprofit boards. 95, 98, 99% of well-meaning people want to get back to the community. But unfortunately, there's very little training that people get. In most states now, you're required to get training to be on the Board of Education, but there's no training required to be on a nonprofit organization. And it really requires training because what most people do is they just, get on the board and they just go into the room and then they see everybody saying all in favor, say aye, and they say aye. And that, within 6 months, they'll second a motion and they go home and tell their spouse that, hey, honey, I'm going to meet the minutes next month because I seconded a motion. I'm excited. And then oftentimes people will, and they mean well, but it's not fulfilling. It's boring for a lot of people. It's like they want to do well, but it's not great. And so what I'm good at, and I'm not good at a lot of things. I can't fix the electric outlet in my house. I can't fix it. My car, somehow my new one would break down. But somehow with governance and leadership, I'm good at. And it's probably just my life journey that allowed me to learn about myself a lot and know myself well and things like that. So in that case about building the bicycle, knowing when you're ready for it, I'm here through as long as you need me. And that's not a problem. I just, what I don't do is, try to have you, buy a lease for me for like a car for 3 years. And it's not necessary. If you need me for 3 months, you need me for 3 months. You need me for 6 months, I'm here. And it's not a problem. I hope that helps your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Dennis, could you talk a bit about my experience in behavioral health?
Right.
Has included way back, probably 20 years ago now, a bunch of board work with community mental health centers.
Hmm.
And my experience here with Santa Fe Recovery is substance use treatment organizations are a bit different, have not always been in the mainstream of what we now call behavioral health. And and like many behavioral health organizations, they're a little bit like the small family-owned organization, and then the CEO suddenly opens their eyes and realizes they have successfully grown something way bigger than they ever imagined.
Sure.
So it's a little bit like the founder syndrome that we experience,
Hmm.
and also a little, of organizations that have done what they do for a long time
Hmm.
without a lot of companion organizations that do exactly the same thing and that alliances are formed with. So we formed alliances with children's organizations, and on an individual level, I think our CEO has alliances with other mental health, community mental health, and behavioral health organizations in Santa Fe. But I just like to hear you talk a little bit about what your experience has been with substance use treatment organizations and the sort of founder syndrome.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. The founding center is a little bit separate. To be honest with you, Karen, my experience, whether it was recovery center, addiction, treatment, behavioral health care, mental health, whatever, are really, from a governance point of view, are really not that much different from children, family service, and intellectual disabilities. They're really not per se. I mean, I once did work for a major theater, a playhouse, and I don't know much about theater, but issues with governance and leadership are actually very common throughout, meaning that every organization has a mission that talks about why they exist, but few have a real compelling vision about where they want to go. And the problem with most nonprofit organizations or maybe organizations is that they're not aligned between the board and the CEO leadership team to achieve the vision. They're kind of misaligned, or they're in silos. And that's a big problem that I find with a lot of organizations that, and maybe around this, so that they think there's a wall up, like, the board does this and don't come in here and do this here. And the actually reality is that to be a really effective organization, the board and CEO have to be in partnership. And that's a new concept, new philosophy that both the board has a sense of ownership, not micromanaging at all, but ownership, that you and Sylvia want to get together and do things on behalf of the organization. So last little bit about that. In terms of founder syndrome, I've worked with a lot of founding syndrome, and whether it's the board who founded the organization or CEO, whatever has been the founder, and I've dealt with founders that have been in the business 30 years and they got to find a replacement and all that stuff here. And it's founding syndrome is difficult because it's hard to kind of let go. It's a very difficult process, sort of letting go here. What I try to focus in on all time is really, at the end of the day, is not just what's best for the organization, but I come back all the time to the people you serve. It's trying to get away from your own ego, your own sense of self, that it's really about others. And I have a course on how to become a high performing board, and I deal with board behavior, and I've dealt with all forms of board behavior. So I think in terms of founding syndrome, that can be addressed. I think whether you're a recovery center, addiction center, I've dealt with, honestly, probably 400 clients in the past 15 years alone. So to me, there's just like a lot of themes, okay, that are consistent here. And so I'm not sure I'd be surprised by anything I'm going to learn, Karen, from you or from the board, or the board members have been here for a while. And you get that too. I mean, I just finished up working with an organization. I got a board member's there 40 years. And I'm like, why? I mean, it's just that, and that's a big issue, whether, you know, you have term limits or not. And there's a lot of board members I know that are opposed to that. But, you know, at some point in time, I always recommend you find a way to keep really good board members involved in some way, either as an advisory board member, as a emeritus status, but keep it involved. You know, you have to get them out the pasture. But when you don't bring in fresh blood, you get stale and you start thinking backwards here a little bit. So I think you need fresh blood. By the way, I'm a very straight shooter. I tell what I think. I think I'm diplomatic and polite. I don't curse that much on Zoom, but I can tell you to go to hell in a nice way. But I do think that I just think that there's a lot of ways that I think organizations should. I just see it how the better ones work. And my guess, without knowing the detail, is you probably have a fairly good CEO that, in all honesty, could learn how to utilize the board maybe in a better way. And you probably have some board members that maybe feel a sense of a vacuum, that things are not being done and want to jump in and end up micromanaging just because they feel a vacuum, which is what's natural. So I am confident that there's no aspect of what I would find if I'm selected to work with you that I've not seen before. I mean, it just, I think I've seen it a lot. Karen, I hope I answered that question. I hope I did, but if I didn't, just tell me and I'll try it again.
Yeah, no, that's okay, Dennis. I think there is, in addition to the substance use and addiction treatment organizations that in different parts of the country that I've experienced feeling somehow different from others, there's also that kind of we are different is part of New Mexico's
Okay.
attraction, strength and weakness.
Okay.
And so I think that also plays a role in it, and it connects to founder syndrome. And it is easier to select people to hire or people to partner with who you know, or who are family members, or
Right.
who,
Yes.
you know, so there's that phenomena here as
Okay.
well.
Well,
And I mean,
everybody certainly
just
is
look
unique.
at the three of us extremely white people, for instance, and
Yeah.
I don't think, not a Hispanic thread among us. So that's an example
Yeah.
also.
And I would say to you, one of the things I will look at is how you recruit people and reappoint people on the board. So I'll give you an example. There's nothing wrong with recruiting people, you know, because it's, you know, you like to have people, you know, on the board for, you know, companionship and collegiality and things like that. But I approach board recruitment in a very different manner. I focus on competencies first, and a competency is different than a skill. Skill is something you learn on the job. Like I learned how to be, you know, record assets and liabilities. I learned how to take out a tooth. I learned how to put a marketing plan together. Competencies is things like inspirational leadership, strategic thinker, brand builder, change agent, etc. here. So one of the things I would do with yourselves, the Santa Fe Recovery Center, on the recruitment side is just ask you, if you were starting your organization today, what would be the ideal competencies you'd want on your board? And I just explain what they are. I would then say, what are the competencies that you have on the board today? And the gap between 1 and 2 would be what your priority should be for recruitment. So example here, if, I'm just making this up here, if your strategic thinking for some reason was, just making up, was one of the areas here. Well, now you start talking to people in Santa Fe business community, the education community, the chambers of commerce, other behavioral, or whatever, about who do you know is strategic thinking. Then factor in though, geographical diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, blah, 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 blah. And then skills, you say, geez, you know, we don't have a, you know, we don't have a CPA on the board, but we got one that's a strategic thinker, or we don't have a woman on the board, or an African American, or a Hispanic, or something. So I have a different models I use to how I think you can build your board. But at the end of the day, yes, you may feel unique, and you may feel sort of alone here. But I do believe, having worked across the country, and I haven't worked in Alaska yet, but I've worked in Hawaii. And actually, if you're in Hawaii, I always take the job. I will fly out there in a heartbeat. That's not a problem. As a matter, you get the lowest rate in a Hawaii client for me. I've seen so many organizations that I don't see a lot of differences between you in my world of being recovery versus being a children family service. If you would hear them talk, Karen, they would tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that there's more in common than you think. But if you have founding syndrome is an issue to be addressed. And so when I do an assessment, I'm just not looking to see are you compliant with your bylaws. Anybody can do that between you and me. That's not what you need here. What you're looking for is I can tell. I mean, sometimes I tell people I look stupid, but I'm not totally stupid. And that jokingly, I can sense there's some issues going on between good things with your CEO and other things with your CEO. And that has to be addressed because it's not healthy. It's not good. And if you both learn about a new way of operating, and you can move forward. If you can't, though, then you have a different situation here. So I'm telling when I do an assessment, it's very comprehensive, and it deals with looking at everything from recruitment, bylaws, meetings. Here's an example, and I would ask you just out loud here today. When you have a board meeting, how often do you make sure that there's a strategic issue or challenge on the agenda that you're talking about? Something like this here. Okay, so want to call the meeting to order. I want to get approval of last month's meetings. Okay, thank Karen. Jeff, second the motion. Fine. Today we're going to talk about the impact we're having in the Santa Fe community. Today we're going to talk about what is the image or reputation of our organization. What's the value we're providing to people? Having a discussion that everybody, because there's always two people on a board that won't shut up, and there's always two people that don't say anything. And so the board chair's job is to make sure that everybody's engaged. I find level of engagement is probably the most important thing in an assessment level. Are they engaged? And I'll give you an example. So I did, again, a number of years ago, not that many, but within 5 or 6, a well-known national prestigious residential treatment facility for boys and young men, 100 years old. Like Boys Town, but not Boys Town. And the board chair said to me, Dennis, I just can't seem to engage my board members. And I said, Lou, I get it, no problem. I said, it's like telling me you got a cold or flu. I'll take care of it. I can address it. It was 12 members of the board, and I interviewed them all, and 4 members of the board. Jeff said to me, if I miss a board meeting, I don't feel like missing anything. I'm like, wait a second. Lou's telling me he can't engage him. These 4 guys are telling me they don't miss a meeting, don't miss it. So I went to the board meeting. And I heard, okay, meeting the order, approval of minutes, fine. Okay, Bill, would you give your CO report? Thank you very much, Bill. Anna, finance report, thank you. And any questions of Ann? Fine. All right, program update, fine. Okay, Gala, 100th anniversary, any updates? Everybody buying a ticket? Yes, okay. Anything else to come before the meeting tonight? No, okay, I'll see you in 3 months. And I'm going, oh my God, I wonder why it'd be painful. And so I just observe. And so I'm happy to get on a plane and fly to Santa Fe. I have no problem with that these days now that I'm vaccinated and all this stuff. But I bring, I think, a very different approach that I feel comfortable saying this than anybody else you're going to talk to. I just don't think they have the depth of experience that I have, the years of experience I have, and the joy that I have in doing this here. And it comes from my life experiences. Mm-hmm. What questions have I not addressed, Tom, or anything else?
Well, I want to make a couple comments. One of them is I think we've got some Zoom videos of past board meetings.
Oh, wonderful.
That you might be interested in seeing.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. You got those. I'll take those in a heartbeat. Sure.
Yeah, that might simplify a lot of what we're talking about. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about is there's sort of a checklist of things boards are responsible for.
Right.
And one of them is the evaluation of the CEO.
Yes.
And so if you're going to evaluate the board, you're going to evaluate the way the board is evaluating the CEO.
Absolutely.
And I wanted if you would just comment on briefly how you would go about evaluating the board's process.
Okay, so first thing I'm going to ask for is, can you give to me your most recent CEO evaluation that the board performed? I would like to see what it was based upon. Was last year? Did you as a board sit down? Were you as a board chair or your previous board chair sit down with Sylvia and talk about these are the goals and organization, and was there a predetermined goal set? But I want to see what the evaluation and how you did it. Some organizations, probably not yours, but some organizations just have, either the executive committee or the board chair do an evaluation. They don't get input from everybody else. I believe everybody needs to have input. But at the end of the day, I believe this very strongly, that the CEO works with the board, but reports to the board chair. That's my thinking here. And so, you would be the best. So I look at the process. I look to see, one of the things that we're big believers are these days is not only the board evaluating the place, but having a 360 evaluation. So it's not just the board giving perceptions on it, but the staff and things like that. And so we have a 360 tool that is highly effective, that we want to measure how he or she, in this case, she's perceived by both, not only the board, but the staff here. I've seen people that are, highly regarded by the board and the staff hate them. They don't realize how mean they are. So I look at the process, and then we would recommend, listen, I try to find what your strengths are. I'm not looking to be critical. I find what your strengths are, but I make suggestions. And so example here, we created a tool that, you may send out forms and everything and ask people to fill in it. We have a form that does a CEO evaluation in 8 particular areas. And so it gets done, it comes at the end of the week and everything. So we look at forms here. We look at how is she done a self-evaluation? And is she involved in self-evaluation? How is her perception of how she's doing compared to your perception? Is it same or different here? So I'll take a look at all that process and how it's communicated, and then how the goals are set for next year here. And they're always, as you know, they're always quantitative and qualitative goals. There's the quantitative is, the bottom line, revenue growth, program growth, et cetera, philanthropy, and there's always the qualitative side of it. But one little mantra that I have is this. Good boards evaluate their CEO, and amazing how many boards don't even do that. But good boards evaluate the CEO, but great boards evaluate themselves. And that's it. I know when you hear, what do you mean? I'm volunteering. What do you give me a break? I'm volunteering my time and energy, and I've got to be evaluated. Get the hell out of here, Tom. But it's important to observe how well you're doing, because at the end of the day, you're all here for those that are in recovery. And though I don't have personal experience with that, but both of my kids were, and one's 10 years sober and one's 4 years sober. And I know, heartbreaking. I know as a parent what that's like. So I know the business you're in. So we will look at all that, Tom, if that makes sense. I hope that
Yeah,
answers.
it does. Karen, Jeff, anything else?
Yeah, there's one thing that, I'd like to hear Dennis talk a little bit about, which is that when you evaluate us, you're going to, as usual, find that it's a target-rich environment. There's lots of things we can work on.
Me too, by the way. You can give me my feedback there.
And one of the things we're dealing with is the organization has been growing extremely rapidly. So in a lot of places, there are a lot of places where we're trying to get structure and systems and processes and delegation and blah, blah, everything in place. 3 years ago, this was a $2 million revenue organization, and the budget for next year is going to be between 17 and 20.
Yes.
3 years ago, it was 35 people. It's probably going to be 250.
Wow. Yeah.
So Sylvia is trying to manage that kind of growth.
Right.
And she grew up in a founder environment, but she wasn't the founder.
Okay.
So she's got some habits to unlearn and some new habits to learn, but I don't think she's going to fight you on it. But one of the things we're all going to deal with, I think, is priorities. So, as a part of your recommendations, can you sort of lay out how you let us know what's most critical to work on first, and
Yeah.
and lay out how that flows?
Yep, I do. And a couple things here. As part of this process about, board assessment, I will also give you, both either in writing or on the side, my assessment of the pluses of Sylvia, the things she needs to work on, because there's, that doesn't get resolved always in 2 or 3 months here, but I understand the board assessment here. And when I make recommendations, they're comprehensive, but I always then have a conversation about what's the priority. And so I'm going to make something up here, but it wouldn't be unusual to have 20 recommendations. But this, you can't do 20 at a time because nothing gets achieved. So I'll say, my opinion, these are the top 3 or 4 recommendations. Why not even ask you your opinion? What do you think? What is important to you here? But I'll tell you what I think. I'm not bashful kind of a guy, but I think you can't do everything, Jeff, at once, clearly. But I think you got to pick your priorities, and I don't know what they will be until I get to know, if I'm fortunate to be selected to know your organization well. But it has to be a priority listing. It's not just here's a listing. Go cut the grass, hunt the deer, and skin the cow. I mean, whatever. You have to have a priority list and what's to focus in on. And at the end of the day, again, I do assessment review, but I'm here to help you as a board do better. And I'm sure there's growth issues with Sylvia. I can only imagine. If you've been a $2 million operation and you're going to what you're going to now, that's a different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a different ballgame. Yeah.
It's a very different ballgame, and I'm not here to make judgments at this stage of the game without knowing her at all. I'm sure she's a very good person here. But I'm sure there's some challenges she has with that may have some shortcomings, and she probably, my guess, without knowing her, probably get defensive about it. That's my guess. Just only having done this 1,000 times. So, but at the end of the day, not that you need it, and I know she probably gets support here, but not today. But if she's getting coaching, we'd want to know how she's getting coaching, how that's working out. We have fabulous executive coaches and stuff like that here. I used to do it myself. I delegate it now to other people. I focus on the board. But we'll get a really good feel for. And I don't have a problem at all adding, 5 or 6 people that work for her. I don't nickel and dime. It doesn't matter to me. But I think the initial focus should be on the board. But she's part of that board, even though she's not a board member. But she's part of it. It's a big part of it. And how does she perceive the board? And does she perceive it? Does she see as where's the board doing well for her, but not doing well? And at the same time, I could see myself talking to Tom and Jeff, you and Karen, saying, here's my thoughts about the board. But I'm sure there's going to be times, I have no doubt, Sylvia, there's a couple of things here that you need to be aware of that's working against you. And I'm happy to have that conversation because my wife has a conversation with me every day for 40 years about things I need to improve upon. I can tell you that. So if you want it, she'll give you a download report and it's recorded and it can send to you. I hope that answers your question, Jeff, but I think that I don't think my assessment is not just, are they meeting on time and people showing up on time? That's a waste of time. It's nonsense. I want to respect your time. I have plenty of time. I want to just respect your time. Any other questions, Tom or Karen, you have, or let me show you something. If you have a second, you got just a second here. I'm hoping I can. Let me show you something if you don't mind. Hold on. Oh, I can't minimize it when I'm recording. Never mind. That's okay. I'll if you're interested, I'll follow with and send you some stuff about some of the tools we have. Besides the work that I do myself, I think you got to still have human intelligence involved in this. But we have the assessment tools that are pretty comprehensive and explanatory. So you may not need something today, but I might say that I see your leadership tool or evaluation tool of Sylvia as a board, but I would suggest, next time you do it or in 6 months you do it, I would also add a 360 tool, things like that. And, something like that.
Thanks, Dennis. Karen, anything, or Jeff, anything else?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to help you and say Karen got there. It's been a long time since I've been in Santa Fe. but I mean, I was there in 1961. I was a little boy when my uncle was in the Army going to Hawaii, but I spoke in New Albuquerque about 2 years ago at the National U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I was a keynote speaker on boards. And so I'm a keynote at a lot of places. And anyway, I hope that, I'm sure you got a lot of people looking, but I hope I make the grade.
Well, where's
Well,
home for you? Where are you living now?
Well, I've been living in New Jersey for a long time, but I just tell them, my wife and I we work.
When you say New Jersey, what exit?
Yeah, exactly. Exit 37 on 80. We're moving to Woodland Hills, California at the end of July. So we're moving to be closer finally to our kids and my grandson. And I'm excited. My wife is, been in the medical, my wife's a surgical nurse practitioner, but she's been, under bone marrow treatments for years. She's doing great. She's doing well. I'd say well. And with the whole COVID situation and having everything gone virtual, that it just makes it easier for me. So I'm in New Jersey, in New York, and but I've got people in Kentucky, New England, and again, I just interviewed a person to be head of our West Coast office in LA. So, but I'm going to be in Woodland Hills at the end of July, early August.
good for you. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dennis. Karen and Jeff, while I've got you on the phone, I'm going to go ahead and send you a Zoom link. And if we could have a 5 or 10 minute call on Zoom afterwards, I think that would be the easiest way to do it. Dennis, thank you for everything that you've told us and shared with us. And we will be getting back to you probably within a week or so.
My pleasure. If I can answer any questions, let me know. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work with you. And if I'm not, I wish you good luck anyway.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Bye-bye, Jeff. Bye, Karen. Bye-bye.
Bye.